We're going to move on to panel number 2. This panel is about building a resilient and sustainable food system from farm to table. And as you know, the food demand continues to rise. Addressing the challenges requires considering new perspectives of diverse stakeholders. This discussion will cover the entire food supply chain from production to consumption, identifying key obstacles to keeping the food system within safe planetary boundaries. We will also explore ways to improve connectivity, promote local consumption, and create solutions that enhance the well-being of both producers and consumers. So join us working towards a sustainable world with better food systems. Let's welcome to our stage for this next panel, Oksana, and I apologize because I'm not sure if I'm going to say your last name very well. Oksana Hrynevych, Agricultural Project Manager at EIT Food. EIT Food is supported by the EU. It leads the world's largest and most dynamic food innovation community, and they invest in projects, individuals, and organizations that share goals to deliver positive impact at speed and scale. So please welcome the moderator, Oksana. Welcome to the Gap in Between. Thank you for being here. Now let me welcome our speakers. First, we have Mr. Adam Kybird. He's the head of Triodos Bank and is in the Food Transition Fund. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Triodos is a global leader in impact investment with over 25 years of experience offering solutions that tackle critical sustainability challenges. The expertise of this fund is wide. It has expertise in energy and climate, financial inclusion, sustainable food, agriculture, and impact equities and bonds. Thank you so much for being here, Adam. And our next speaker, we have Yanniek, Schoonhoven. Welcome, Yanniek. Founder of EARA, the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture. Yes, next we have Mr. Ivo Degn, CEO from Climate Farmers. Welcome, Ivo. Climate Farmers is in the business of scale regenerative agriculture in Europe. Wonderful to have you all here. It's an amazing topic. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Sorry? Okay, it works. Thanks a lot for the presentation, for inviting us. For us, it's an important step toward the regenerative agricultural practices implementation and scaling. Thanks a lot for the participants. I'm very glad to meet you all in person. Someone for the first time, someone to more frequent. And yeah, I would like to start with the first question to Ivo, just to give a brief introduction for those who are not so familiar as we are with the RegionAg topic. Ivo, from your perspective as a co-founder of Climate Farmers, and I know that you are building the infrastructure to scale the RegionAg practices, how would you define the regenerative agriculture and why it is so important to do this transition towards it?
Right. So regenerative agriculture, maybe for those that are not familiar, it's a topic that has come out of a very, very niche kind of environment into the mainstream in an incredible short amount of time. 2019, almost nobody had heard of it. By now, it's the main topic when we talk about agriculture and the future of agriculture. It's a fascinating sort of approach that bridges between sustainability and productivity. So for the first time, we have an approach where we can both look at climate adaptation, we can look at climate mitigation, we can look at biodiversity enhancement, improvement of the livelihoods of farmers, while producing a lot and very high quality food, without a whole lot of technology, without a whole lot of sort of artificial processes, really working in collaboration with nature. And this topic has come into the mainstream incredibly quickly, hence our mission to build the infrastructure under it to make sure that it can do that effectively. And the question of how do we define it comes up again and again and again and again, because sort of how do we implement it on a large scale? And people say, we can't really implement it unless we define it. For those of you who are not deep in agriculture, let's look at a different example. If you ask, what is leadership? Define that, please. Nobody here would really be able to do that in a way that, right? Nobody on the other side would say, yeah, but we can't implement it if we can't define it. We all know that leadership means doing the right thing in the right moment, depending on the context of your team, depending on the context of your organization, depending on who you are. Regenerative agriculture is the same thing. You implement good agricultural practice according to the context and according to who you are as a farmer, that improves the ecology of the farm, that is the biodiversity, the water, the carbon, that improves the economy of the farm, that is, let's say, in the end, the profit-loss statement of the farm business, and that improves the community of the farm, that is the diversity, equity, inclusion, that improves the health of the people around you, that improves the quality of work that is in the community around you. So it's a kind of agriculture that shows positive results on all of this within the given context of the farm.
I think you have just covered the main points that we could now deploy throughout the conversation. Yanniek, from the farmer's perspective, I know that you are applying regenerative and also some organic practices on your farm in Murcia. Which is the main challenge farmer faces when he or she opts to make this transition?
So my name is Yanniek and I live in La Junquera, which is a farm in the south of Spain, 1,100 hectares, and one of the biggest organic regenerative farms here in Europe. And there's many challenges that we're facing when we transition, right? Because first of all, you have knowledge. You have to gain theoretical knowledge, but then you have to apply it on your farm. And unfortunately, it never works out like in the books. You always have to experiment a lot, and maybe 9 out of 10 experiments, you have to try to do them again to make them in a way that they actually work in your specific context. So I would say one of the first things is actually applying this knowledge on your field takes time. You might need 4 years because 1 year doesn't work because you didn't do it right. 1 year doesn't work because the weather was different than normal. And then for 2 years, you want to know if it actually works, right? Then besides that, the context in which you work, and unfortunately now with climate change, it's something that we can no longer know what will happen with the weather, with crazy hailstorms that happen all of a sudden in summer instead of in April, and other of those elements that we don't know up front. This really makes it challenging for us to do this transition, because we can say now, okay, we need to do to transition to more diversity of crops, because that is good for the farm, it's good to become more resilient, and you have less of a monoculture. Great, but then you do that, but then all of a sudden your weather patterns change, and that no longer serves the farm. It no longer serves that area. And that happens in many regions in Europe and probably all over the world, is that we can no longer know what the future will bring in terms of rain patterns. And for a farmer, that is very key. That's very challenging. And that I think a third challenge in this transition is the financial side. Even though I do strongly believe that you can make equal income, or even some cases maybe better income with regenerative organic than with conventional, because that is what is happening on our farm. We now have compared to our neighbor's land, 20 crops, 20 people hired, whereas the neighbor is still at 1 crop, 1 person hired. So it is possible, and it is financially interesting, yes. But all those experiments that you do will require an investment, either in time, in land, or in money, and sometimes in all 3 of those, right? That you might not get back that first year, and maybe not that second year, and maybe the 3rd year, yes. But you need to bridge that, right? So you need to bridge those years in which you're experimenting, which is so important to make sure that you got it right, but you need to have the financial backup to actually be able to do that. If you don't have that backup, you might go bankrupt after year 1. And you say, okay, this did not work. But you have to know that this takes a few years to get it exactly right. So I think that financial part is really challenging as well.
Yeah, thanks for your point. I think we will come back to that in further questions, but thanks for highlighting that. I think the economic part is a crucial one when we are thinking about this switch and transition from one type of practices to another one, which is much more innovative, but also a little bit scary. But okay, let's come to Adam. I know that one of the main points that you are focused in Triodos is improving food security and safety, and I think it's an important thing. From your perspective, in which lines can we work to meet growing food with regenerative production and making sure that farmers still have the access to land and their businesses are profitable?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's really complicated, right? And I think the panel before we heard about systems change and all of the different things that need to happen to make a shift in the system. The food system is really complex, and you have different actors within it. And you can't, I mean, we've heard some great examples of farmers making that change, but they need the system to shift around them as well. So you need consumers to change how they eat. You need government to change how it finances and supports farmers, and you need people like us to provide that financing to farmers to make that shift. And we're relatively early, I would say, in terms of the transition to a more sustainable food system. So there's a lot more to do. I think partly what's in your question as well is a question I hear a lot. You know, can we really feed the world if on regenerative farming and organic? And I think it's a great question, but it's also the wrong question, right? No one thing fixes the system. You know, in England, when I was young, people said, why do we put wind turbines up? We can't power the whole country on wind turbines. We're not trying to. We now get 30% of our power from wind turbines, 10% from solar, and a mixture of other things. It's all these different parts of the system come together to drive change. And I think for food, that's exactly the same. You know, we need consumers to eat less animal-based proteins, right? If we reduced the amount of animal-based proteins we all consume, we don't need to be vegan. Don't be scared. Very good if you are vegan, but you know, just reducing your daily consumption of animal proteins has a massive effect, right? 1/3 of our global emissions comes from the food system. Between half and 2/3 is from animal agriculture, right? So we know this is a problem that we could shift. We also waste about 1/3 of our food throughout the full value chain. So I think regenerative and organic farming absolutely is where we should be going, but we also need to change these other parts of our food system to make it truly sustainable and sustainable for the farmer.
Yeah, thanks. Great answer. I think, our food system is like a kaleidoscope, which consists of different elements, and this is also our job to understand which percentage will be higher for which element and which is lower, and how we can combine them in order to reach this sustainable food production. Great point. Ivo, based on your experience, what is blocking the internalization of the possible positive externalities of ecological and resilient food systems?
Yeah, so positive and negative externalities, for those in the room that are not into this, what we have in agriculture is we have a lot of often called negative externalities, which means a farm might produce an effect on its surrounding that they are not paying for, right? So let's say we have methane emissions as an example. We have runoff of fertilizer, we have effects of pesticides and similar, and farms are not paying for that currently. In the same way, farms are producing a ton of what would be called positive externalities. So if you are in a beautiful agricultural environment, then you will walk around and you will enjoy the nice farms, you will enjoy the trees, maybe the animals. Let's say you go to Asturias or somewhere like that, you love the hiking, all of this. It produces, of course, biodiversity, it, of course, captures carbon through the agricultural soil. There are a lot of these positive effects that you have on the farm in the same way as you would have negative effects on the farm. In the same way as in a lot of cases in our economic system, right now, as a farmer, you neither get a credit for the positive externalities, neither for the negative externalities. So we create a system where the community benefits on the one hand, and on the other hand is harmed without that actually being accounted for. And right now, as a farmer, you are being paid for one thing, that is producing a ton of food. The more food you produce, that's what you're paid for. We as a society, we are not paying you for anything else. So if we want a beautiful landscape, well, we're not paying for that, so we don't get it, right? So in some cases, farmers do that because they really, really care. In other cases, they couldn't afford to do that anymore, and so they didn't. And so then sometimes you go through agricultural landscapes that are not very beautiful anymore, and that is not a place where you want to live, and that then leads to people abandoning those areas, but nobody's paying for it, so we are not paying for it. So, you know, so the question is, how do we internalize that? And the question is sort of, who is internalizing it right now? Because if we look at like very experienced regenerative farmers already, we know a lot that are producing very high quality, regeneratively produced agricultural produce that also has a very low carbon footprint, that has a high nutrient density, contributes to biodiversity on farms, and they sell that at the normal commodity markets because there is no market right now for regenerative produce, with a few notable examples or exceptions like crowd farming or similar, where you can actually buy from regenerative farms directly, right? So right now, a food company is going to absorb those externalities, those positive externalities, without actually paying for it. So we see cases in which actors in the food system are actually waking up to this and are taking action on this. We see more and more investors investing in regenerative agriculture, more and more corporates, banks, insurances that are picking this up because they understand that unless we invest in those aspects like biodiversity, like healthy soils, we will not have food. Very simply, the agricultural production is at so much risk that it's hardly insurable anymore, which is absolutely insane if you think about it. So there is more and more corporate investment, but what we are working on as climate farmers with a lot of other people as well is to make sure that the way that corporates are engaging with this is actually meaningful and actually supports the farmers in the process, because the way that our economic system works right now is not usually in such a way that is mutually beneficial and regenerative. So in the end, it ends up that the most powerful actor takes a lot of it. So what we're doing is to build farmer and corporate partnerships that are mutually beneficial, lead to those outcomes, lead to decarbonization, lead to biodiversity increases, and lead to more profitable farms in the end. But the short answer to your question is what blocks it right now is that nobody has an interest in it, or nobody has yet understood that they have an interest in it. And so the problem is that most food corporates are waiting still because they say, well, we can still source our produce even without investing in our supply chain. And in 1 year, in 2 years, they're going to notice it's too late, right? And they're going to notice a lot of the farms are really in crisis, and then they will have to act. We would rather they acted now than when it's much more expensive for them to do it and much more painful for the farmers to do. So we will see this in 2 years. It would be better if we did it now.
And I think you also highlighted one other thing, a part of investment, a part that there is a gap between agriculture, farmers and corporates, which should be somehow covered. Otherwise, we are not going to have the possibilities to grow and to develop the sector. And this sector is very, very slow. Also, not only speaking about the investments and also the technologies application, which if we have time, we can speak afterwards. But you also rose one interesting point regarding the profitability, and this is something that I would like to ask to Yanniek. You also have been speaking about the economic part of the transition from one type of farming practices to another one. Do you consider the regional farming system as profitable?
Yes.
And pros and cons.
I will explain. Yes, definitely. We live in an area which is extremely degraded. People are, at this moment, stopping with farming. They're leaving their land barren. And this is not the type of land anymore that by itself will turn into a beautiful forest, right? This is the type of land that will become the desert. What we see in our farm and the lands around us is that in the 10 years that we have gone from one crop to 20 crops, we've also gone from one person hired to 20 people hired. So I think that already says basically everything. And at the same time, we've become loads more resilient. Because in these 10 years, we've had changing weather patterns. We've had loads of hailstorms. We've had a drought the last 3 years. And still, we can pay our costs. Other farms are selling. Not all, of course, but definitely some are already selling. Why are we not selling? Because we diversified. So we said, okay, we need to have at least 1 or 2 crops that do well in times of drought. We can have a few crops that do great when it rains. We have now cows that if there is a drought, the cows will eat the cereals that we cannot harvest, and then, well, you have this circularity within your farm that always something benefits when something else does not go well, right? And that, I think, also makes us economically a lot more resilient. We will always have a yield from something, which means that maybe we don't have the top yield when it's a great year, but we are definitely not going bankrupt after 1 or 2 years of drought. And I would say that is a very big difference with our neighbors that have only cereals, that now have for the 3rd year 0 harvest, and they will have to think, are we selling this year? Because we cannot pay the bills. You still have your costs, you still have to seed, you still have to prepare your land, because otherwise you also do not get any subsidies anymore. So they only have costs. And I think that is where a regenerative farm also differs from a conventional farm, is that it's much more built into the wider ecosystem. And it can also count on the wider ecosystem to survive.
Okay, thanks for very interesting insight. And coming back to this, Adam, I would like to ask whether there are some options or financial support to make this transition from, for example, conventional farming to regenerative one smoother.
Yeah, I mean, there are some financial products out there. So Triodos Bank in the Netherlands provides organic transition loans. So you talked about this transition period, 3 years plus, where you have you probably have lower yields, but you're not able to sell at a premium that organic would bring you, and the bank can help bridge that gap. And we see us and others also increasingly interested in acquiring farmland together with the local community and making it to be more regenerative and organic. The problem is the scale is far too small at this point in time. That's one problem. We were talking about it before. The World Economic Forum said we need 350 billion euros a year, invested to drive towards a sustainable food system, and we're currently at 20, right? So we're at 1/15. And there's many reasons for that. I think partly what Ivo said, the lack of defined pricing. For if you make this transition, you need to be able to sell your product at a premium. Is it me?
Sorry, everyone. You need to be able to sell the product at a premium to make a sustainable business. Also, if you're a farmer practicing regeneratively, you should be compensated for the benefits you're bringing from an environmental perspective, and you should be paid for the carbon sequestration and these other benefits which conventional farms are not. And if you can build a better business model and a clearer business model, absolutely people will invest in it, right? This is the problem. So the real root cause here is that we don't have enough fantastic examples. We need them to scale. And we also need impact investors to take that initial risk and demonstrate this can be a really good place to invest and get a positive impact. And again, like I mentioned, the energy transition before, I think we're at the start of this journey still. And there's a lot of work for people like me to do to say, hey, this is a great investment opportunity, and this is why. But we've still got some work to do.
Opinion? Oh, mine doesn't work. Thanks for your opinion, and yeah, for sure there is a gap that we have to cover, space to work, and yeah, this is why we are here. I don't know, we have 1 more minute before we can start with the questions from the audience. I would like to ask to all of you, like an open discussion, what can be the driver to push towards this implementation of regional practices? What can really, from your opinion, push the society, not only farmers, think that we can switch from buying products from conventional farms and push more towards regenerative ones?
Okay. I would say it's the nutritional value, for me at least. I think knowing that, on average, regenerative organic produce has 30% higher nutritional value than conventional produce, and then not even calculating that conventional produce often has negative effects on your health. If people would know that they would only need to eat half a cucumber instead of a whole cucumber, let's say, they would maybe act on that, right? Because if I think about my kids and I think about their health, I want to give them the best. I would want to give them food that is healthy, food that actually helps them grow, food that has high nutritional value, and if that food also helps the environment, that would be only a plus. And I think often people do not yet realize the negative effects of certain foods and the positive effects of well-produced foods. And I think when we get that more into a wider audience, I think many people would choose. If I would see a supermarket and say, okay, this has 30% higher nutritional value than the same product next to it, of course I go for the higher nutritional value. But that is not yet a thing.
Yeah. I think that would have been my point, absolutely. That's why I buy regenerative. I think the other point is it is happening. So we see so many farmers in the transition. The farmers are doing it already. The question is anybody supporting them? So they have to do it. They are moving, they are trailblazing. The question is, how many farms are we going to lose? The question is, how difficult is the transition going to be? And I mean, we're talking about food security here, so this is not a minor topic. We are going to have food security problems unless we do this. The farmers are going to do it. The question is, are we going to leave them alone in it? So it is happening already.
I'd just add to those points. I think absolutely on the nutrition point, that's what I would have said as well. But then we need to try and engage with consumers. You need nice consumer brands. You need businesses like crowd farming that sell directly, that can sort of cut out the whole, a lot of the value chain and say, hey, consumer, do you realize the difference between an organically grown orange and a conventionally grown orange? And I think that's really important too. We need the data, and we need to be able to speak to consumers and engage them in a really effective way. Because I do agree, if people know this and they understand it, it makes sense.
Thanks a lot for your points. I agree with all three, and there is nothing to add from my side. And I think we have a field to work towards this smooth transition. With this, I would like to wrap up. Maybe we'll have some questions from the audience. Yes, please. Could you pass the micro? Yeah.
I can't speak loud. Yeah. So, Yanniek, I'm curious about your soil. You said you've been farming for a while. You've diversified your crops. You described all the great things that happened. You didn't mention the soil. Very curious to see what's happened in your soil.
Yeah, so what we see in our soil, so we are in dry land, right? We are not irrigated, and we have 300 liters of rain, or 300 milliliters, you say, in a good year. We've had a 1.5% soil organic matter increase in 5 to 10 years.
Also don't know is huge. This is absolutely unheard of in this kind of context.
Yes, yes. So it is possible. It's not everywhere the same because we have 1,100 hectares, and for example, what we see now after 3 years of drought, we still have indeed a lot higher organic matter than our neighbors, but life in the soil, fungi, bacteria, is at this moment very low. But then again, for the past 3 years, there hasn't been rain. So, that is also to take into account. We also see, and that is maybe something for more the experts in this room, is that even though we still till, because we do minimum tillage, we still increase soil organic matter. So I know that in regenerative, this is always a bit of a discussion, let's say. But in our context, with minimum tillage and getting that little bit of organic matter that grows above soil, getting that into the soil is really helpful. This was, of course, is very context dependent, but for us that works like that. So yes, definitely soil health increases. It's not as fast as in irrigated land because we also have 1 hectare of irrigated land where we are at 4.5%. Yeah, it's just water does so much, right? Yeah.
And we're talking about an absolute desert there, so that's incredible.
We're quite extreme in that sense.
Thanks a lot. We had one more. Okay.
I have the microphone. Hi, Yanniek. I have a question. What do your neighbors think about you, and what would be the ideal neighbors for you?
So, in the beginning, they thought we were like crazy hippies. And we would do an open day and maybe 4 people would show up, right? Now we have 100 people showing up at open days. We are very close to the local government of the areas around us, and we are seen as one of the pioneers that are going to help to repopulate our area, which is very depopulated, and people really listen to us. So in the 10 years that many people got bankrupt or left our area, we actually grew. So yes, in the beginning, people thought, well, crazy people. Now they come to us to actually ask what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I think also these things need time, and they need examples, because people are not going to change if there's not a successful example. So I think we really need to work on having as many successful examples that people can learn from, that people can visit, that people can talk to, have exchange of ideas, and that really helps, because then people say, ah, but it actually does work in my area. Because if you go 200 kilometers up, it's a totally different context. And people say, yeah, but that works 200 kilometers up, but that's not my soil, that's not my rain patterns, and I don't have anything to do with those people, so yeah. And I think that takes time, but you can get there.
Thanks. Last question, because we are running out of time. Thanks.
I'll make it quick. I'm Dennis. I'm the founder of Better Fish, turning seaweed into ingredients for the food industry, like plant-based tuna. You can try at the booth there. Love the discussion about a sustainable food system on land, but maybe a question for Adam. How do you see the role of the oceans actually to contribute to more regenerative and resilient food systems?
Yeah, thanks. I think I might not have a microphone. Do you hear me? Yeah,
Yeah.
Good. What a wonderful question. We just closed an investment in a seaweed farm last week, right? So, and this is the first time we've done that. Yeah, I think it can be incredibly interesting because actually you're using, particularly for seaweed, you're using a space that wasn't previously farmed, right? You're using an economically inactive area and creating economic activity within it and production, and that's good on a number of scales. Also incredibly sustainable, right? It sequesters carbon. It's a good additive, all these things. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge potential. I think in Europe, we have a long way to go still to have this as a core part of our diet. But again, you know, like I said before, there's no one thing that fixes this. But I think actually increased use of seaweed and better use of our oceans can really play a role in building an overall more sustainable food system. So it's very important. It's still early days in Europe, but I think it's super exciting. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. With that, I would like to wrap up. Thanks a lot for our speakers, to you audience, and I think together we can do a big effort and job towards this smooth transition. Thanks.
Thank you.